Just started. Cool.
Just started.
We're live now. It says Statehouse steps on the post.
So Statehouse Stomp.
At the steps. No, see, like on the when you posted it to the screen.
Yeah.
It says it's at the Statehouse steps.
Well,
Because it's whatever you put in advance.
well, and that's what. Yeah.
That's not what we're doing. So is there any way to change that?
Well, you've got administrator.
Yeah, so
You've
can I
got,
go in and change that
Yeah.
without interrupting your screen?
as far as I know, let's find out.
Not letting me.
No edit post. Up the dot, three dots here.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to do.
Oh.
Yeah, the Statehouse steps. View edit history. It's not letting me do it.
Well, if they're watching, they aren't going to be coming.
True. I can post in the comments.
There you go.
I just posted in the comments.
Boom.
Maybe the architect made it.
Already. So we are already live. We're already streaming. Okay. This is our videographer. And Pace is coming down. It's all changed. So you gotta follow.
Thank you. Shouldn't, it's a highly directional microphone. It shouldn't feedback. You need to be fairly close to the microphone when you sing because it is so directional.
All right, hello everybody. It's good to see some faces here, some beautiful faces. We are Elizabeth and Julie, and we're just going to do a couple songs today. We're really honored to be invited to participate in this. Obviously, it's really important for our First Amendment rights that we all need to do something, stand up, speak up, sing a song, clap your hands, stomp your feet. It's really important that we're able to keep our right to gather together in peaceful protest. That's paramount. So, I don't know. We've thought all about so many different songs we could play today, and decided to play one that's original that I wrote. It's called Non-Judgment Day. I saw a bumper sticker on a car one time that said Non-Judgment Day is near. I really liked it. It got me thinking, and it's just a song about accepting everybody as we are, who we are. It's a song about voices coming together for freedom and justice. And let's play it. So be who you wanna, love who you will, and I will lead you, darling, up on freedom hill. Help me break these borders, break these chains, and we will stand for freedom on the judgment day. I said, hey, hallelujah, hey, hallelujah, we'll stand for freedom on the judgment day. I said, hey, hallelujah, hey, hallelujah, we'll stand for freedom on the judgment day. For many voices, not just a few, will be the change and bring us closer to the right to freedom and happiness, the right to choose and follow our will. I said, hey, hallelujah,
Thank you, Julie and Elizabeth. Give them one more round of applause. My name is the Reverend Williams, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to Non-Judgment Day. As we gather in this space, as we gather in this place, I was asked, who do you represent here today? And I had to laugh because, you know, folks, there are over 20 community organizations, several of whom I am proud to serve with, who have sponsored this gathering, who have put their names behind this message, who have put their people to work behind this nonpartisan activism. It's really hard to tell you who is here today because there are so many from all across the state of Ohio, from all across our state, who have come together to say, no, no, no. So I want you to know that regardless of what organization you see me working in and you see me a part of, and same goes for everyone else who speaks here today, we are all one in this place. We are all together to say, we believe in the right to protest, we believe in the right of free Ohioans to express their views, and we will not be silenced. As we gather today, we are joined by a great number of people and a great number of people from communities of faith. And so our first speaker I would like to call on is the Reverend Dr. Jack Sullivan. The Reverend Dr. Jack Sullivan from the Ohio Council of Churches. He has a biography and a litany of awards that I could not do justice to. But Jack, we ask for your blessing and your words and your prayer this day.
Thank you, Terry. Good afternoon, everyone. A few words and then prayer.
Get a little closer.
Okay. Many of you know that I am a native of Cleveland, Ohio. Home of the next Super Bowl champion, I might say. But I have lived in 8 states and the District of Columbia. I have lived in dense urban areas and also in small micropolitan county seats. Inside every community that I've called home, I was surrounded by untold numbers of hardworking, socially responsible people. In visible and sometimes less visible ways, these diverse women and men and children took pride in who they were while honoring their neighbors and doing their best to contribute to the common good. They did not always agree on the important issues of life, but they found a way to live fairly and peacefully with each other. This is not just my story. It is that of scores of people across this nation and throughout this state. They are people who understand that life is full of ups and downs, and at times we win, while at other times, no matter how well we are prepared and how hard we work, we lose. There was an ethic at work in so many of our families and neighborhoods, a standard that led us to be gracious when we won and to commit to working harder, longer, smarter, and more creatively when we lost. Winning did not give successful people or parties the authority to silence opposing views. And losing did not give permission to the less successful to seek to disable and eliminate their opponents by changing the rules of the competition. Now, I know that the picture I just painted did not apply to every context and every situation. Even so, fair-minded Americans understand that these principles form the moral schematic, and the ethical infrastructure on which we can build and maintain fair, balanced, and just ways of living with and among each other. Deep down, all of us understand that if we abandon fairness, we abandon American exceptionalism. If we discard justice, we discard American integrity. As fair-minded Ohioans contemplate measures that are in the docket of Ohio lawmakers, bills designed to silence and render unlawful the public witness of dissenting Ohio voices, and bills designed to discourage many hardworking Ohioans from participating in elections by making it harder and more challenging for them to cast a vote, it becomes evident that fairness is not a feature of the sponsors of these bills. Goodwill does not guide their actions. Integrity is not included in their plans, and morality is not their motivation. Rather than considering dissenting voices of patriotic Americans who are holding on dearly to any semblance of liberty and justice for all people in all neighborhoods and all zip codes, architects of these bills seek to crush them. Rather than supporting the voices of those who have been locked out of the American dream, denied due process, and denied justice, and have their historical truths omitted from the historical record as taught in our schools, the engineers of these bills seek to criminalize them. So rather than working harder and more creatively to win elections on the basis and strength of good ideas and strong moral character, the authors of these bills seek to wield legislative power in ways that void the votes and the voices of Ohioans not in their bases, and thus unethically tilt the proverbial election and decision-making seesaw in their favor. These bills, which are part of a not-so-hidden national political playbook, drip with the social toxins of interposition and nullification. And they ask patriotic Ohioans to vacate and alienate the First Amendment protections of freedom of peaceful assembly, freedom of speech, and freedom to petition the government to act right. These bills require Ohioans of faith and goodwill to turn their backs on God-given human dignity and to reject codes of fairness and morality that have served as a backbone of families, of communities across this state for generations. Like many Ohio legislators, I identify as a follower of Jesus of Nazareth, whose self-disclosed mission, as found in the 4th chapter of Luke, was to bring good news to the poor, to proclaim release to captives, the recovery of sight to the blind, and to let the oppressed go free. Out of this biblical framework, I have 2 questions for the lawmakers who, like me, identify as Christian. Tell me, just who would Jesus silence? And who would Jesus block? Who would Jesus disenfranchise? Who would Jesus trivialize? More questions than just 2. The answer, my friends, is none, nobody, and neither should they. At a time when many decry what they identify as cancel culture, We find it quite interesting that these same voices strike a contradictory tone as they seek to cancel public protests and cancel public dissent offered by people with different political, social, racial, and cultural views. Yet I say, let the word go forth. Today we are not against any party. We are against disenfranchisement. We are not in favor of any party, but we are in favor of democracy. So in the name of fairness and morality, I join fair-minded Ohioans in this room and across the state in calling for the protection of human dignity, the protection of national integrity, and the protection of democracy through the rejection of these anti-protest bills. And now the prayer. Let us pray. O God of history, God of hope, we thank you for conferring unto us a glimpse of your sacred vision of human wholeness and a sense of your divine passion for human flourishing. For every time we humans seek to impress you and our neighbors by our laser-focused attention to empty and meaningless rituals, and while we pledge our allegiance to vain, self-centered politics, we can hear the voice of Micah reminding us that what you really care about and what you really require of us is that we do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with you. Dear God, on this day when one season gives way to another, as comfortable warm air turns damp and cold, we acknowledge that as people of faith and vision, already we feel the cold winds of political indifference and legislative overreach. Many who have been entrusted to serve and work for the good of all Ohioans now concern themselves only with measures that have been surgically crafted and engineered to champion their worldview and to tighten their grip on power. Many are using their privilege not to offer creative ideas that lead to just, fair, and hopeful outcomes for all zip codes, but to silence the voices of those who dare offer alternative views while expressing their hopes for fairness and their expectations of justice. Yet on this rainy first day of autumn, as we move from one season to another, from one building to another, we acknowledge your vision for humanity and wholeness that transcends all seasons. Your expectations of justice transcend political party. Neither Republicans nor Democrats are exempted from your call to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with you. At a time, oh God, when it is so tempting for people of parties and platforms to seek to retain power and influence at all costs, help our legislators to keep faith and to trust and invest themselves in your vision for human wholeness and your passion for human flourishing. Help them use their positions to come to the aid of the most vulnerable and to hear the cries of those who love this state and this country, but as yet to feel that the state and the country love them back. Enable our lawmakers, oh God, to know that peace is not the absence of social protest, but the presence of justice. In your great and holy name we pray. Amen, Amen.
You know how much it takes for me not to hug my good brother after this, in this COVID time, as we gather and we try to be safe. I noticed some of you, when Reverend Sullivan took us to church, took us all the way down with what he said and all the way back up with what he prayed. I noticed some of you were stomping your feet. I love that because we're here for the Statehouse Stomp. We're here to stomp on. Can you stomp your feet? And we're not stomping our feet like little kids stomp their feet. No. We're stomping our feet to let folk know that we're on the move. We're on the move in this place because what Reverend Sullivan said is true. We're not for or against any political party. We're against every kind of oppression and disenfranchisement and injustice. So as we gather here and you hear something you like, you hear something that you say, yes, I'll stand for that. I'll move for that. I want you to stomp those feet. I want you to bang whatever you've got around. Make some sound with your hands in a COVID-safe way to let folk know we are here and we're moving. Despite this pandemic, despite the pandemic of bad legislation that we see going on over in that other place, we know that we're on the move. Our next speaker is the Reverend Joan Van Beesler, Unitarian Universalist Justice, Ohio.
Yes, I am a little bit shorter than some of the other folk. Let me start off by saying that you all are absolutely beautiful. You look beautiful being here today, and I want to thank you all. This is so great. Now, I want to raise up the importance of our democratic process and our First Amendment rights as a means of honoring the inherent worth and dignity of all people, and the need to hear all of our voices as we work to create beloved community together here in Ohio. Now, our democratic process rests on a foundation of voting rights, which are supported to and tied to our First Amendment rights to assemble and engage in freedom of speech, and to effectively address the many serious social justice issues that we face today, including recovering from this pandemic. We need a strong democratic process here in Ohio that upholds our rights rather than works to stifle and destroy them. Now, right now, here in the Ohio legislature, they're considering bills that would use fines and threats of felonies and even organizational and congregational bankruptcy to create barriers that will discourage people from exercising their rights to come together, to protest, and to speak truth to power. But we know that for democracy to work for all of us, it must include us all. And so we need our Ohio elected officials to uphold our First Amendment rights of free speech and assembly and stop these anti-protest bills in the House and the Senate. These are bills that would stifle and block and destroy the power of our voices. It would block the power of the voices coming from communities of color and young people, as well as the communities of those who are other disabled and the elderly. And these efforts to block First Amendment rights are not only anti-democratic, but they're also an assault on the dignity and worth of all people in our society. Because as people of faith, we're called to close that gap between the brokenness of what is and the reality of what could be. We're called to a higher standard of truth-telling, even if that truth is inconvenient. And here's some truth for you. Restricting the right to vote under pretense of election security is based on a mountain of lies. Restricting and blocking our rights to assemble and speak truth to power is a direct affront to who we are as U.S. citizens. And the truth is These efforts are rooted in the lie that the full benefits of U.S. citizenship are a privilege for an elite few rather than a fundamental right for all of us. The truth is that America is in the midst of a new kind of civil war, with battles for justice on many fronts, including First Amendment and voting rights. We are approaching a critical crossroads, and the road taken will have consequences and long-term effects which will determine what America wants to be and wants to become. So coming together here in public witness here today is a form of democratic expression older than the United States itself. We gather here to shine that light of truth on what is happening in our state legislature and ensure that we all understand what's at stake here. To hold our legislators accountable, hold their feet to the fire, and demand action on these issues that impact us all. The right to protest. The right to protest is also something that was spoken of by the Rabbi Abraham Heschel back in 1965, when he wrote that protest is a form of prayer. He said, for many of us, the march from Selma to Montgomery was about protest and prayer. Legs are not lips and walking is not kneeling, and yet our legs uttered songs. Even without words, our march was worship. I felt my legs were praying, he said. And please note that that march from Selma was an illegal protest, which would be met with charges here in Ohio. So anti-protest bills like HB 109 criminalize those whose conscience calls them to practice their faith by preaching justice, speaking truth to power, and praying with their feet in the street. And during the time of Nazi Germany, just to give you a little bit of history, many pastors of the confessing church, like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, some of you may have heard that name, who preached truth and acted for justice, were jailed and murdered. And here in Ohio, HB 109 and the other anti-protest bills would force pastors to either censor their preaching and teaching for justice or risk the destruction of their congregation through fines for supporting or aiding a possibly illegal protest. That ain't right. And if we have to censor our sermons to survive, then freedom of religion is also threatened along with freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. So whatever our color, whatever our background, whatever our zip code, Americans across the country value our freedoms. We want the freedom to vote in a transparent process that we trust so we can elect leaders who deliver for us. Leaders who will deliver protection of our basic First Amendment rights, who will support the creation of fair district maps. Amen to that. And protect our access to the ballot box. We demand that our elected Ohio leaders protect our democracy and our First Amendment freedoms. And we demand that they do this so we can build a better future for all of us, no exceptions. So I'm going to close with a couple of words for the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who said, "All we say to America is be true to what you said on paper." Now, if I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand, he said, the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they hadn't committed themselves to that in those countries. But somewhere, he said, I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere, I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere, I read of the freedom of the press. Somewhere, I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest for what is right. And I call on all of us to be true to the values embedded in our Constitution. Protest for what is right. And that is why we are here today.
Amen. Reverend Jones bringing all the Martin Luther King quotes we don't hear on MLK Day, right? We don't hear those on the lips of the people who put forward this legislation, do we? I want to call up. I don't know how much you have to get ready, sister. Dear Sister Patience Thomas, who is the musical Bishop of Columbus, as far as I'm concerned. She's going to give us a music and a song in response.
I can't handle that pressure. We're in 2021, and what the Bible calls the rulers of darkness of this world are still trying to employ old and outdated oppression. And so this song takes from the civil rights movement of the 60s, and it asks the question, when will we overcome? We've been getting ready for this train, said it was coming. Trying to keep thanking the Lord to get on board. We wasn't worried about no baggage, figured a ticket wouldn't do. Here we are looking around, still trying to see it through. Listen to the sound of the masses, how they're shouting, marching and cheering, tear gas in my eyes. But what happens when somebody feels they're running out of time? I think that train should have been here by now. I want to know when will we overcome. I'm still trying to be me. What an irony, yeah. Keep on fighting for peace, fighting for peace, fighting for peace. Come on and let's get to step into the place. Ain't nobody worried, yeah. We got tired of the smiles and the lies coming from their faces. We've been overcoming someday now. Seem like doggone, yeah, forever. We're gonna change anything, it's now or never. And I wanna know when till we overcome. Oh, help me to believe, yeah. What an irony. Keep on fighting for peace. We keep fighting for peace. Fighting for peace.
And fighting for peace in this place is Jerry and Yuri. Jerry, can you come and give us a word? Give us a word.
That was created by a 14-year-old boy 40 years ago. It was given to our people as a gift to those who were resisting colonialism and oppression and being arrested in the streets for standing up for what they believed in. That was 7 years before Native Americans were given the freedom to practice their own religion. You see, the Constitution is just a piece of paper to us. It's just another treaty full of lies. The Declaration of Independence is just another piece of paper to us. Because all of the treaties that have been made with our nations, with our people, have been broken. For 500 years, we've been dealing with this colonialism and this racism, which are wed. Because we don't have the freedom and haven't had the freedom to protest and assemble peacefully. Our music, our dress, our religion, until I was 14 years old, was illegal in this country. It's still on the books. I went with Reverend Barber to Arizona and Mary Aguilera, wherever she is. And we waited for the feds to come arrest him because he had been away from his reservation for too long. And on the books, we're still considered prisoners of war. And they can still come after us and drag us back to the prisoner of war camps that they have set up for us. This is the laws that are still in the books in our country. In North Dakota and in Minnesota, in North Dakota, over 600 indigenous activists have been arrested. In Minnesota, over 1,000 indigenous activists have been arrested for protesting pipelines that are coming through those states. And this is coming to Ohio because groups like ALEC are creating legislation and are introducing bills that favor the petrochemical industries so that they can go ahead and put these petrochemical plants on the Ohio River. And it's egregious, it's unconscionable that people of color and those people who are most affected have to be the ones who have to make the changes, who have to get arrested, who have to stand in the streets. And yet I look out and I see those same people here today. And I know it's a heavy burden. But that's what our ancestors died for. That's what they suffered for, was to bring you to this point today so that you can make a stand. And sometimes, even though we're afraid, we have to stand for our relatives, for our brothers, and for our sisters. We have to find that courage to stand up and do what is right for each other. Power to the people.
Jerry, thank you. Thank you so much. We in this place must remember that any issue that you care about, any issue you could care about, any issue that could be an issue is at issue right now. Because these bills impact everything you care about. These bills impact every issue you could advocate on. These bills impact your own voice, your ability to speak your mind out, your ability to speak truth to power. Power doesn't want to listen. But we here are still stomping, aren't we? We're still stomping anything that sound because power will listen this day. As we come to a close, our dear friend, the Reverend Brandy Slaughter, I believe is with us. Reverend Brandy from the Ohio Council of Churches. She's a pastoral spirit in my life. She's going to fill us with joy.
I feel like Reverend Jack has already preached. But I do want to start by leaving off where the brother he said power to the people. And my question is, do the people have power? Yes, we do. Do the people have power? Yes. We do. Yes, we do. Although there are structures and systems and oppressions in place, we still have power. I've been following the protest legislation, and I've been following the attack on voting rights. And for me, one of my biggest places of focus have been on the maps, the gerrymandered maps, the ones that were just passed out of the Ohio Redistricting Commission. Now that ain't so bad. And I've worked over a decade in this work, working with inside the legislature, working for the governor, working to move laws forward, both in the Statehouse and in Congress. And over time, we have become worse and worse, more polarized. When I say redistricting, oftentimes people think of politics, and some of it is political. But the other part of it is how it also silenced our voice. Yes. How it takes away our ability to impact laws, to have representatives that care about the things we care about. Yes. Just as Reverend Terry said earlier, there's not an issue that impacts any of us that isn't impacted by districts that are unfairly drawn. Yes. So my encouragement is, we all said that we do have power. Yes, we do have power. My encouragement is that we continue to fight and continue to stand. It looks hard, but we've got another opportunity with the congressional maps that are getting ready to be drawn. And we have to insist that it's a transparent, fair process. We have to show up when these hearings are scheduled, whether they're scheduled in the middle of the day, at the last hour, whether they're scheduled in the evening in some remote place. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. That's what just happened. So regardless to what tactic or what scam they try to pull on us, we have to stand. We have to stand. The Bible says the power of life and death are in the tongue. And so we have to speak. We have to stand for righteousness. And my closing in this is that we all have courage. We take on the courage of the ancestors. We take on the courage of each other so that we can be what is needed in this hour. Yes. I said I've done this work for a little while, over a decade, and I happen to have a few conservative friends. And I was talking to one, you kind of have to, because you got to know, you have to have an ear to what they're doing over there. You got to have a few friends that'll tell you. Yes. And I was talking to this man of God, and he said something at the beginning of our conversation that just really shook me to my core. And what he said is, everything that's happening in Texas, Ohio is primed for. Yeah. We're primed for it. So you think about Texas. You think about everything that's going on there: voter rights, reproductive health, death penalty, anything that we care about, and how that system has positioned itself to just move things forward. We can't let that happen in Ohio. The time is now. We can't let that happen. So I encourage you. You said that we have power. Power to the people, but the people have to stand. And the people have to fight. And the people have to remember. And the people have to become educated. This is not the time to sleep. This is the time to work. Thank you.
Amen. Well, friends, as we come to a close here, I'm always wary about being the person in between a group of motivated people and their next motivation. But as we come to a close here, I have a few closing words for you, and I will read to you the letter that has been compiled and brought together by all of our organizations for this event. And then we have a few more selections from our musicians to close us out in this space. Ordinarily, in days before COVID and in space that was not so rainy, we would be out on the front lawn of the Statehouse, and we would march, and we would stomp our feet, and we would yell around the Statehouse and in that space. What we're encouraging you to do today is to let this march carry on in every single one of you. We have legislative visits and literature drops for the rest of the day that you can participate in. We want you to stomp your feet when you go over into that Statehouse. We want you to make it known why you are here. We want you to tell everybody with a legislator pin on, and everybody else too, why you are in this place, that you believe in freedom of speech, that you believe in the right to protest, and that you don't want these bills. Kristen's waving around back there. We got some shoe prints even that you can leave around for folk. Let them know, remind them these bill numbers, you know, HB 109, know the number and know that we are coming for you. As we come to this place though, I'm so moved, as a person of the Christian faith, my struggle in this place and in this time of our gathering as a whole state, my struggle is that I share the faith that a majority of the members in that legislature claim to also share. I understand not everybody is a member of my faith tradition, and I honor and respect that. I think everybody has a right to religion and to the exercise of their religion. Somewhere I read that we have a right to that in this country. Amen. Hallelujah. Right? As we gather in this place, though, I am troubled as a person who professes a faith in a brown-skinned man who didn't live past age 33 because he was living in an occupied territory where his race and his social class caused him to be a target because he was a troublemaker. I'm talking about Jesus right now, right? The man that I claim to follow and that a majority of folk in that building over there claim to have a connection to was killed in no small part because he did not play nice. He sure wasn't killed because he made the people in power happy. Right. He was killed because a great number of systems around him decided he was too much of a troublemaker. He was too much of a problem. Yes. And at a younger age than I am right now, his life was snuffed out. And the protest we think about when we hear protests in Ohio, the protests I think about are the protests around the lives of young people of color who have lost their lives, around young Native individuals who have gone completely missing and don't get on the news. Come on. Right? I think about all the things that need to have a hell raised about them, and here we are faced with a legislature that's more interested in silencing the voices of those who cry out for justice than they are concerned with doing justice. As has been said many times here today, that ain't right. That ain't right. We did not send you here to be concerned with quenching the fire that is burning right now in our hearts. We sent you here to the Capitol to do justice, to love kindness, to walk humbly with God and whoever else will walk with you, but to get to that promised land. And that promised land that we're headed to is not a land flowing with felonies and misdemeanors. It is not a garden blooming with mass incarceration and continued colonialism. No, that land that we are headed to is a much brighter land than that. It's a much more joyful place than that. This moment is why we are here, and it is important that we understand what this moment is. This letter that we have that has been produced to legislators in the literature drops throughout the day and will be further throughout this day, this letter has been signed by hundreds of Ohio faith leaders, by dozens of Ohio faith organizations, and it calls us to remember this moment. This moment. Hear these words from many organizations, from many leaders, for many people who care about our state. Religious and civil liberties are in grave danger in the state of Ohio. As people of conscience and people of faith, we cannot stay silent in the face of the worst existential threat to First Amendment freedoms in our state's history. Our legislature has introduced bills designed to discourage public witness, protest, and dissent. Laws that would criminalize churches and nonprofits that engage in public witness have been proposed right alongside restrictions that will make it harder to vote. In the midst of a once-in-a-generation pandemic, while our state strains under decades of underinvestment in social programs, infrastructure, and essential worker protections, the Ohio legislature spent its time targeting speech that conservative lawmakers don't like. Legislators are promoting a crackdown on voices that speak truth to power, aspiring to stifle any people-driven effort to hold Ohio's public servants accountable. This portfolio of anti-democracy bills portrays a very clear racial bias, limiting voter rights, stifling dissent, criminalizing protest, and punishing faith communities that participate in public witness of their moral convictions will disproportionately harm Black and brown communities and organizations. Full stop. We declare that our Ohio, the Ohio we know and love, will never bow to totalitarian pressures that seek to disenfranchise voters and eliminate morally motivated dissent. God has a burning desire for justice. Some say the burning bush described in the book of Exodus is actually representative of this divine yearning, the burning that is in the heart of God for the justice of all the people. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. understood this when he wrote, "It is God's desire for justice that makes the struggle for justice and freedom holy ground." We are standing on holy ground, and we are burning for justice. We will not be silent because the fire of commitment within us will not let us. Friends, you can't be silent. I can't be silent. The fire of justice burning within us will not let us. And so in this time, as our musicians come and bless us, as we go from this place, not a flame that has come like a flash in the pan, but a burning desire that is burning deep within our spirits and our souls. Let us go from this place burning and stomping and letting them know this ain't going away. Amen. I say, hey, bless me and hallelujah.
We're going to sing a song and ask you to sing or speak back these words. This is a song by the Washington sisters, Sandra and Sharon Washington, and it's a lovely song about working for freedom.
So we want to ask you how you feel today. How do you feel about speaking for freedom? How do you feel about singing for freedom? How do you feel about marching or stomping for freedom? Yes, that's why we picked this song, because we thought you could sing it along with us.
And so if you want to sing it back, we're gonna ask you, how do you feel about singing for freedom? I feel fine.
So all you gotta say is, I feel fine. Or say the whole thing,
Whatever, it's pretty easy.
All right.
You can just, we're gonna ask the question and you can just say it or sing it back to us.
All right.
Yeah. I think you're gonna do it. How do you feel about speaking for freedom? I feel fine. How do you feel about speaking for freedom? I feel fine. Won't you tell me how you feel about speaking?
Speaking of the ancestors, I love the ancestral feel of the drums. We all know this song, so I was just hoping we could do it together. About freedom. Woke up this morning. Yeah. Stay on freedom. Yes.
Oh, gracious, unscrew that from the
Loose right
post.
here.
Yeah.
I don't even need that one.
You'd be all right? You'd be all right without it? Okay.
Well, we'll set it
We
down
might
there.
need to just, okay, sorry.
Woke up this morning with my mind set on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind singing, stand on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind stand on freedom. Hallelujah, 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 yeah. Singing, praying with my mind. I'm singing and praying with my mind. Singing and praying with my mind. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Watching and praying with my mind. Well, I'm watching and praying with my mind. Watching and praying with my mind. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Say hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Say hallelujah, hallelujah,
Thank you so much. Give everybody a hand for this wonderful rally. Yeah. Amazing people, amazing songs, amazing speeches. I know I'm feeling it in the deepest of my heart right now, and I hope you are too.
I want to thank all of you for being here. I know those of you who are looking for legislative visits, it's 2 o'clock and you're all like, ready to run out of here. But do know those are not scheduled appointments, so we can go in a few minutes here. For those of you who are doing legislative visits, we are going to play a little bit of a game. Bear with me, it's not that scary, I promise. We're gonna play 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock. All right, up here in the front, we have 2 o'clock groupings. Back there in the back, we have 3 o'clock groupings. What I want you to do is I'm gonna have you go to your 2 o'clock groupings, connect with who's there. Who are you? Hi, great, 2 o'clock. Then you're gonna go to your 3 o'clock. Hi, who are you? How are we going to meet at 3 o'clock with the senator when we've been doing 2 o'clock and we're running around the Statehouse? Exchange phone numbers, text, whatever you need to do, decide where you're gonna meet, when you're gonna meet, all of that. And then we're gonna come back to 2 o'clock and we're gonna meet and walk up together. Cool? So I'm gonna yell it out and you're gonna go to your spot and I'm gonna yell out the next one. Just follow my 2 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock. Are you ready?